Good morning. Today we are going to we are doing some more with place value, and this is chapter 1, lesson 3, and today is August 12th, 2020. So we're going to be looking at today place value in the decimals. So a decimal point looks like a period, and it is used to separate the ones place from the tenths place. Or whole numbers from numbers that are less than one whole. Decimals are numbers that are less than one whole. So decimal places represent numbers or values less than one whole. So we're going to be talking about some decimal place values. We're also going to be talking about what happens when we move across the place value chart. So let's first start with the place value chart. We have just our basics about decimals, and now we're going to look at the place value chart. And this place value chart is from the packet that you had inside the sheet protector, and you had a whiteboard marker in there. We are using that. And what I'm going to do is, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put that decimal point in. And we just wrote in our notes that it's used to separate the ones place from the tenths place. So here's the ones. Here I have the tens, and here I have the tenths. So decimal places have that THS at the end. That is our signal that a number is less than one whole. So our decimal point is going to go here, and I'm also going to put it down here so that when I write numbers in, I know that that's where it would go. So that is where my decimal place would go. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this all fours in here, and then we're going to talk about the values of each of these fours. So each of these fours has a different value. Now when I move to the left, when I move places going this way on my place value chart, every time I move to the left, it is 10 times greater. So each place value that I move to the left is 10 times greater. So 4 tens is 10 times greater than 4 ones. And 4 ones is 10 times greater than 4 tenths. That means I'm going to use some of this space up here as some scratch paper, so I'm going to ignore the place value, extra place value charts up there. If I do 4 ones times, I'm not sure we write that. If I do 4 ones times 10, I get 40. Well, 4 tens is the same as 40. And if I do 40 times 10, I'm going to get 400, which if I move over one more place value, I have a 4 in the hundreds place. That 4 times 10 gives me 400. So every time I move a place value to the left, it is 10 times greater. The opposite is also true. When I move place values to the right, it is 1/10 of the place before it. It's 1/10 greater, and 1/10 is the same as dividing by 10. 1/10 is the same as dividing by 10. So I'm going to use the space up here again as just some extra space. If I have 40 and I divide it by 10 because I'm moving to the right, excuse me, I'll position that on there, because I'm moving to the right, 40 divided by 10 is 4. Or if I do it in fraction form, 40 times 1/10, when I divide by fractions, I would have to put a 1 underneath there, and then I would do 40 times 1 is 40, and 1 times 10 is 10, and if I simplify those, I get 4 over 1, which is the same as 4. So when I multiply that by the fraction of 1/10, I still get 4, because that is what we are doing as we move to the right on our place value chart. What happens if I move 2 places over? So what if I jump from the ones place all the way over to the hundreds place? Well, that would be 10 times 10. So that would be 100 times greater. So 2 places is 100 times greater. So let's put some notes about that in our notebook. So in our notebook, I'm going to say each time I move 1 place to the right, it is 10 times greater. And when I move 1 place ugh, hate when I do that. This is to the left. Sorry, I hate when I do that and I'm running out of time to refilm. When I move 1 place to the left, it is 10 times greater. And when I move 1 place to the right, it is 1/10 greater. It is 1/10 greater, which is where we would divide. So this is to the left. So when I'm going that way on my place value chart, it is 10 times greater. And when I am going this way, it is 1/10 as great. Sorry, I'm going to pause my recording here for just 1 second. Okay, and we're back. And now we're going to talk about place value of decimals in terms of our place value blocks. So normally when we look at our place value blocks, that's 1 whole, this is 10, this is 100, and that is 1,000. But we are going to reunitize these, which means give them different units. So I'm going to tell you that this is 1 whole. If this is 1 whole, I have to think about what is 1/10 of 1 whole. 1/10 would mean that I have separated this into 10 equal parts. Well, what shape here is in this picture 10 equal times? So here is my actual piece, and if I take the rods and I stack them, it takes 10 rods to create, let me put them on there quickly here, 10 rods to make 1 whole. So if it takes 10 rods to make 1 whole, that means that this is 1/10. So this is 1/10, or in decimal form, it is 0.1. This is 1/10 because this is 1 whole. And if I count each individual square, how many individual squares does it take to make this 1 whole? It takes 100 individual squares to make my 1 whole. So that is this shape here, this block, this cube, is 1/100th, or in decimals, it is 1/100th, because it takes 100 of these to fill in 1 whole. Now, if this is 1 whole, what does this equal? how many 1-wholes does it take to make this shape? Well, let's look at that. Here's my shape, and I'm going to stack it next to you, and I have 1 there. And let's see how many it takes to equal it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this big cube is 10 times 1 whole. So if I think about the place value that I did earlier, if this shape is 10 times 1 whole, what number would that be? Then that makes this shape the tens place, because this is 10 times 1 whole. And when we moved this way, this was 1/10 of 1 whole, and that is another 1/10, but if I jump 2 of them, it's 1/100th of that whole. So what this lesson is trying to get you to think about is how the movement across that place value chart affects the values of your numbers. Okay, so we're going to be practicing with that. Now I'm going to just take 1 second to look at the page in your book, and here we're actually modeling it by shading. So when we shade these, if we want to shade 3/10, I would want to shade in, I just talked about on that place value chart, each one of these rods is 1/10. So if I want to shade in 3/10, I would color in 3 of those rods to represent 3/10. And then we talked about how if this is 1 whole, if this shape is 1 whole, and in this book, this shape is normally 1 whole, or it's 100, depending on if we're talking about whole numbers or decimals. So when we deal with decimals, this is 1 whole. 9/100ths of that 1 whole means that if each one of these is 100th, I need to shade in 9 of them. Now we shade in 9 normally in a column or in a row, but it could be any 9. I could shade them all over this and it wouldn't matter as long as I have only shaded 9 of them. And so I would shade 9 of these small squares to give me 9/100ths, which would be represented as 0.09. That is 9/100ths. Okay? And that's all for our lesson today.